who have already made the transition from ELICOS into post-entry in higher education. So based on your responses, we've got this session today. The session is transitioning into the PEAL space teachers' perspectives, and we're going to answer questions such as, how can you make that move from ELICOS to working in post-entry? And what are the new mindsets that might be needed to facilitate discipline-specific academic language support? So what we hope to do today is to provide you with some insights into how ELICOS teachers who've made that transition already, how they've transferred the knowledge and the skills to another context. So I'm really pleased that we've put together a great panel of 4 people who are very experienced in the ELICOS sector and have successfully made that transition. So the first person is Donna Cook. Could you just say hello, unmute yourself and say hello, Donna, so people can see you.
Hi, Donna, everybody.
Thanks, Donna. Donna's from ACU. Then we have Marnie Lee Worth from Macquarie, from here at Macquarie. Are you there, Marnie?
Hello, thanks for inviting me.
And then we have Sue Gollagher, who's now at CDU.
Hello, hi.
And we have John Smith from Griffith University as well.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so these 4 panelists, as I said, they're all very experienced. Some of them as teachers, some as teachers and managers in ELICOS, and all of them have made the transition into post-entry. And you're going to see that really quite varied experience. So I'm going to invite each of them in turn just to give a little introduction to who they are and what they do and how long they've been doing that. So I'm going to start with you, Donna, because you're at the top of my list.
Okay, thanks very much.
Pamela, just before we kick off as well, I just wanted to let people know that we're recording this session. So if you don't want to appear in the recording, then you can turn your webcam off.
Although we encourage you to keep it on. But yes, okay, sorry, Donna.
No problem. Thanks, Pamela. So I'm the National Manager for the English Language Centre at ACU English Language Centre. And I personally haven't transitioned into the post-entry space, but we have transitioned as a team. So we're still working in ELICOS, obviously, but as numbers have become depressingly low, due to current circumstances, we have tried to look for opportunities within the university where we could harness our skills and develop our skills and show that our skills are of value to the wider university. So the things we're doing in the post-entry space at the moment is we're delivering a course to not our students, but a partner university students in Italy on PhD writing. So, you know, we took our pedagogy and our experience in teaching academic writing and teaching potential PhD students through ELICOS to build a course and deliver a course via Zoom and open learning that is working with students who are doing their PhDs at a partner university that doesn't offer the English language support, because most of the students there don't do their PhDs in English, but some do. We also drew on our digital skills and developed those more, and our understanding of intercultural communication to develop some H5P modules on intercultural communication, which have been embedded into ACU business courses for all students doing first year business units. And now there's interest in those modules from other areas within the university. We captured stories from our past students who went into Masters of Teaching and Bachelor of Teaching courses from their practicum experiences, and developed a series of Zoom workshops to help prepare students, more international students specifically, who are going into pracs where a lot of knowledge is assumed and they didn't have the assumed knowledge. And as ELICOS teachers, we heard their stories, and now we're delivering from July a series of workshops for those students. And we had 3 of our amazing teachers with their knowledge of grammar develop some webinars for our partner schools for teaching grammar within the classroom for primary school teachers in our partner equity schools. So as a team, we're doing lots of different and varied things within the post-entry space.
Wow, that is quite varied. So mostly offshore, Donna, the stuff that you're doing?
No, all of it is onshore except for the PhD writing course.
All right. All right, thanks for that. Marnie, can I ask you to go next? A little introduction to what you're doing?
Sure. So guys, I'm within Macquarie University. I'm still within the university, but I've been seconded from the ELC over to Wollongamaroo, which is basically the Indigenous Office of Indigenous Strategy. So I'm here. I've been invited here as well by traditional owners from this lovely little part of Arnhem Land to work with a select few students who have come down from Arnhem Land from a bush hub. So bush hubs are a new way of providing access to education for Indigenous students and non-Indigenous students in remote communities around Australia. So, and this group is an Indigenous group. So it's great to be here. I've been within the university since 2001. I know that sounds like a really long time to be in the one place, but universities are so connected with, you know, what's going on around the country that it's never boring, and you get to do these wonderful things from time to time. So, you know, what we do is basically, as I said, we work with a select few students who have come down to live here to do varying degrees within the university. So I provide workshops and one-on-one help with the academic literacy and skills for these students. We work very differently because these students are Aboriginal people that are very rich in their culture and rich in their tradition. So it's been a big learning curve for me. I've come to this role because of my work that I have done with Indigenous students before, back with Macquarie University in 2007, where I wrote a first year, academic literacy skills course to help retention rates. And also in 2019, I think, I did just a very short stint with these students for about 6 weeks. And the students, got value out of that and went back to the elders, the traditional owners, and they said, well, we want that lady. So so that's how I got the job. It's a Commonwealth funded role, and it's a Commonwealth funded project. Yeah, I guess, look, because we were asking, how do we get our current role? Basically it's experience with working with Indigenous communities from Australia, and also, for me personally, I've worked in East Timor, Brazil and Thailand. So that's kind of helped as well, and having my qualifications. I hope I'm not kind of jumping too far ahead in the questions, Pamela.
We'll come back to some of that detail in a minute. So maybe I'll skip over to Sue now to introduce herself.
Hi, okay. I'm going to speak mostly about ICTE at the University of Queensland. In the post-entry space, ICTE was responsible for delivering concurrent support programs for students at the university. So there was a range of programs teaching students in engineering, pharmacy, dentistry, law, you name it, we did it. These programs were developed because we would be approached by academics who had students who were struggling with their academic literacy skills. Mostly they were for international students, but increasingly we were working with students who were not necessarily international students. They may have been domestic students who had English as an additional language, or they could be English native speakers who, for whatever reason, needed help developing their academic writing or speaking skills. These programs were adjunct, meaning they ran parallel to core courses within the university. Some of them were obligatory, some not. So there's a whole range of courses that we delivered. Quite a few of them increasingly were not what we would call academic literacy, but perhaps more clinical communication skills. So students in pharmacy and dentistry needing to learn how to communicate sort of with colleagues, but then also with patients. I'm now, up to 2 weeks ago, I shifted to Charles Darwin University up in Darwin, and I can't speak to what we're doing up there at the moment because I'm part of a new team of 5 academic learning advisors who have been recruited from around Australia, bar one, who's still with us. And our job over the next semester is to come up with a new model of support to support as many students at Charles Darwin as possible. So I'm really excited to get my teeth into this new project, which is really, really interesting, especially a project that has top-down commitment from the university itself, and it's being driven from the top. So I can't say what that's going to look like. Maybe I'll get some ideas today.
Okay, thanks very much, Sue. And last but not least, John, if I can hand over to you to talk about what you do a little bit.
Yeah, I'm Assistant Director of Studies for University Programs at Griffith University, and I work within Griffith English Language Institute. I've been there for about 15 years now, and for the last 10 years, I've been the Academic Operations Manager for Griffith's concurrent support programs aimed at mostly international students. We have a wide variety of programs, like a lot of universities. I think our 3 biggest would be what we call ELIC, PELE, and HELP. ELIC is a compulsory undergraduate credit-bearing course. We have 4 of those courses situated in each of the 4 academic groups, so arts, sciences, business, and health. PELE are adjunct tutorials that are attached to specific postgraduate courses. Those courses are selected by the Dean's Learning and Teaching, and they use a wide variety of different measures to decide which course they want to attach a tutorial to, but we manage those tutorials, and they run parallel to other course content. And like some of the programs that Sue was talking about, they teach critical communication skills, but they also provide the scaffolding needed for the students to deal with the assessments in the course, the vocabulary, the various tasks they need to accomplish. And the other program is called English Help. It's a consultation program. So students can attend a consultation with one of our tutors for up to 45 minutes a week. We also provide adjunct workshops and online materials through Help.
Thanks very much, John. So as you can see, really varied. I'm just going to try and summarize that. Some of these, the staff on the panel are based in an ELICOS center at a university, two and a half of them. One of them in a central unit. So Sue, you're in a unit that's specially for the development of academic literacies. Some of them are working with domestic students, some with international, some with both, some with EEL, English as an additional language, some with non-EEL. We've talked about the notion of academic literacies as opposed to just English language proficiency. You've heard people mention undergrad, postgrad, HDR, so a whole range of different student types that they might be delivering them to, onshore, offshore, credit bearing, adjunct, embedded. These are some of the key terms that you really need to learn if you want to move into the PEAL space and to read about all these different mechanisms. And also there's been commentary about discipline-specific support as well. So you can see it's highly complex and highly varied. So I'm going to move to some questions now, and some of you have kind of half answered this question anyway, but my first question is, how did you get to your current role? Did somebody come along and say, hey, would you like to be somebody in the PEAL space? John, I'm going to ask you, because I think you're the longest in the PEAL space of our panel today.
Was that me? It got a little garbled on my side. Was that?
Oh, did I garble? I
don't think you garbled. I think my speakers garbled, but it was like,
okay.
All I got was, I'm going to ask, and I was like, I think that was me.
Yeah, it was you. How did you get your role? How did you get into post-entry?
So I was an assistant director of studies on the ELICOS side, and this was about 2000. I started at Griffith 2006, and so around 2010, there was a movement within Griffith, an understanding within Griffith that international students required a more significant degree of support that had been provided to them before, particularly in terms of their academic language development. And at that time, Pamela was working at Griffith. And so she, along with a number of other instructors, lecturers, were brought in to build a program that eventually became known as the Griffith English Language Enhancement Strategy, which involved a number of different strands, some of which I talked about earlier. One of the other people that she was working with at the time retired around then. He was an assistant director of studies. And it was, given my experience in our higher degree, our higher order academic English classes, so like our direct entry program and our upper level EAP courses, it was kind of a natural motion for me to move in to take over his role in that space. And then Pamela and I worked very closely together over the next several years, building up those programs, expanding them, testing them. You know, it was a different, I think it was a different era there for that space. A lot of what was being done in the academic language enhancement space was really aimed at native English speakers. And we were, I won't say we were treated as, you know, put in the corner by the rest of the professional development area, but it wasn't a space that had been particularly explored. I think what was being done at Griffith at the time was really breaking new ground. It was exciting to be there. And I think a lot of it was just, you know, I had the right experience and happened to be in the right place at that time. And so it was a natural move from what I had been doing.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to pass over to Sue now to comment perhaps the work that you did at UQ. How did you get into that initially? Because presumably your experience at UQ is what stood you in good stead to get the job at CDU. So how did that first happen?
Look, I've always had an interest in EAP. I've been teaching EAP since the early 1990s, and I had spent most of the 1990s working at a university in Turkey where I did English for specific academic purpose classes there. So I had that background back then. Coming into the University of Queensland, it was you know, like perhaps other English language centres at universities, there's a lot of EAP classes and stuff. But we were asked, I remember particularly in the early 2000s, probably about 2004, being asked to go over and deliver an EAP class to a group of engineering professors from Chongqing. And so, okay. So I picked up my EAP materials and strolled across campus, sat down with these postdoctoral researchers with my materials, and realized within about 5 minutes that what I had was completely inappropriate and was not really what these guys needed. So I began to educate myself very, very quickly. I started reading around the field. I discovered John Swales. I discovered the All Association. I educated myself and developed a lot of knowledge about academic literacies and research writing. So then when I was then asked to start working on our post-entry courses, and eventually became senior teacher and then academic manager for Concurrent support. So I had the opportunity over 17 years basically at the University of Queensland to build a lot of knowledge about how learning happens at the university and how academic literacies are developed or not developed, as the case may be, while students are learning. So I think that gave me a body of experience that then led me into my current role.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, that was the same with me. Sorry, Pamela, that was the same with me. I remember when I took over that role, you handed me a whole stack of literature. You just said, read this. And that was very, very similar experience. And that was, you know, it was both similar and yet had such a different feel to what we had been doing in ELICOS. There was things that I could, you know, there were handholds that I could find, but a lot of it was different enough where I was going, okay, I need to really sit down with this new material and get my head around it.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's being able to stay on top of, the latest research, what's being published out there in the literature, and that's one of the things in going from ELICOS into post-entry work, is just really knowing your stuff and knowing the literature and being able to put that into practice.
Yeah, exactly.
So Donna, would you like to comment how you got your role?
Yes, so not my role, but the new version of my role, because I've been in the academic manager role for a very long time and now national manager. But during that time also, I took the opportunity, and again through lots of reading and research myself, to be involved in some research projects through the Learning and Teaching Centre at ACU, working with embedding academic literacy and English language communication skills and clinical communication skills within units within the health sciences. So that was some years ago. I think that gave me the confidence to be able to communicate with academic staff and work across different disciplines. Then my director, who is here, Marta, she organised in the beginning of COVID, and when she took on the role, for me to present in different forums within the university to frame our skill set. We're not just an ELICOS centre, but these are the things that we have the capacity to do and promote ourselves within the wider university. And then it was just a matter of saying yes to opportunities that arose, finding the right people within the team to work on them, and doing a lot of reading to communicate and successfully complete the tasks that we were able to take advantage of.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize some of the things that I'm hearing here, in some cases it's kind of right place, right time, and a bit of good luck. In some cases it was top-down strategies that really kind of smoothed the way for this to happen, or an understanding manager that's pushed you in the right direction and said, hey, these guys over here have got some great skills that would be useful elsewhere. You've all talked about developing skills. That, EAP is a great starting point, but it's definitely not the end of it. You've got to keep developing those skills and the knowledge. And you all talked about reading the literature. And one of the things that we're going to do at the end of this session is to share on the website, I think, Sophie, a starter pack of literature for those of you who are interested in reading some of the seminal texts around academic literacies and post-entry. And you've also all touched on the need to communicate with academics, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So let's think a little bit now about the skills that you had, the skills that you could take and were transferable, and what the gaps were. All right, so I don't know who wants to start off. Marnie, maybe you. Do you want to talk about what you were able to transfer easily and what you needed to learn and a gap you noticed?
Sure. Look, as I've said, I work with Indigenous students from a remote community in Arnhem Land, and yes, they're domestic students, but English is like their fourth or fifth language. So TESOL methodology, really being able to use that in this space, it's actually quite, it's quite unique. Yes, it's been done, but that's something that is a transferable skill for me, and it's been wonderful. It's been amazing. And that's not just from my perspective, it's from the students. The students are doing activities here and with me, and they're saying, we've never done this before. We've never learned English like this before. English makes me tired. It's exhausting, but you make it so much fun. And I'm like, well, thank you. But it's about the methodology. That's what I was thinking to myself. Challenge, was it, Pamela?
Yeah, what were the gaps? What did you have to learn? What was different?
Culture. From my perspective, for my particular situation, it was learning about culture. I've done Indigenous studies in the past, and yep, as I said before, I've worked with Indigenous students before, but these guys really live the traditional culture, if I can say that. And spirituality is such a big part of their living and breathing, like that is what they do. So that's something for me that I've really had to learn, and being able to listen and understand that yes, I'm an expert in what I'm doing, but I am not the only expert sitting at that table when I'm talking to those students or talking to the people here at Wallangamaroo. So it's very much a collaboration, a collaborative effort in putting things together. So
understanding the context or the culture is pretty critical. Sue, John, do you want to comment on?
I was just about to say what Marnie said sort of resonates with me so strongly, because I really think one of the things about moving into this space is learning to collaborate. No doubt the skills we bring as ELICOS teachers are invaluable. I think that, you know, we're good teachers. I know for a fact that my teaching colleagues at ICTE are outstanding. I think they're really good teachers and they bring that to the classroom, and that, you know, we're able to teach in ways and engage students in ways that are quite natural to us, but might not come naturally to people from different backgrounds. So for that, but the change in mindset in learning to collaborate, as Marnie was saying, so you're working with academics, you need to position yourself differently. As ELICOS teachers, we can kind of be like the king of the class, so to speak, you know, and the focus of attention. When you move into the PEAL space, you are very much a collaborator. You need to position yourself differently in relation to the academics you might be working with, but also to the students. Yeah, we're working with students who are experts sometimes in the discipline that they're learning to communicate in, and we come in as the literacy experts, and it's a joint effort. And I think that just takes a little mind shift. That can be like a little tricky initially.
Yeah, I think kind of continuing on that point, you know, in ELICOS, your students are there to study English, and that is their main focus. Whereas in the PEAL space, it's getting through their coursework, passing their assessments, and English is a vehicle for them to do that, and developing their English is the vehicle for them to do that. But their goal is to pass the course, and sometimes, you know, getting that grammar just right, you know, and you know, the focus that you could sometimes have on a particular point in ELICOS is a secondary goal for the students.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. In developing the academic writing course for the PhD students, you don't want to use too many things that take up time, because they have got an incredible demand on their time. So you want to try and create learning experiences and scaffold tasks and give them everything they need that's going to facilitate the writing of their course without taking up too much time. So that was the biggest challenge for me. And I don't know how many books I read on writing a dissertation while preparing that course. But what John said about the time commitment, they're not there to learn English, they're there to learn something else. And what you're doing is facilitating that something else, not so much teaching English. I think that was the biggest mind shift for me.
Yeah, I think you're all
sorry,
right.
Pamela, go ahead.
Yeah, language is just, it's not the purpose, it's the vehicle. And you're right that it's harder in some ways to get students interested in developing language, and it's harder to make academics understand that it's important. And you've also touched on the fact that there are two key stakeholders in the PEAL space, the students and the academics. Yeah. Let's just go back to the gaps. John, did I ask you about what you found easy, what to transition, and what were your gaps?
Well, I've been in the space for a long time, so it was, and there were a lot of gaps initially. So I actually, what I ended up doing was canvassing our tutors that work at GELI, and it was interesting what came out. And it was just a reminder of some of the things that we had to deal with over the years. But what the discipline specificity was something that a lot of people brought up. You know, understanding the different genres. You know, we focus so heavily on the essay or the report in ELICOS, and quite often that's not a genre that's overly explored in a lot of courses. So it was, you know, all of a sudden you're in an English help consultation, you're having to help students with a SWOT analysis. You know, so these, and the language is subtly different from discipline to discipline. How we write in education linguistics is not how you write in business or in health. And so that was a real gap and a real challenge for for a lot of the tutors brought up, and it was definitely one for me as well. Another one of our tutors brought up knowledge of the university's services and policies, just understanding how the university works. Because it comes up so often when you're giving advice to students, trying to point them, because we're only one support service at the university. They have access to a wide variety of services, and they're going to ask questions that are kind of outside your expertise. But there's going to be somebody out there who can support them. And so it's understanding how the university works and how you can put them back in touch with those spaces. And that's an area that you really need to spend some time learning about, and learning how courses work, how where students find the information about their courses, how they find where their assessments are, because quite often they don't even know that.
Yeah, I agree, John. That's something that I've come across as well. Like being able to help the students navigate, for example, here at Macquarie iLearn, and not every iLearn site is the same. And to be honest, some are really quite complicated, the way that they have put their assessment pages together.
Is that your learning management system, iLearn? Is that like, yeah.
Yeah. And also with what you're saying too about the tutors, like being, the literacy support person working alongside content tutors is what I call them, has been fabulous. And sometimes there is that content specific knowledge that we just don't have. We don't have that. That's not our area of expertise. So that's where I liaise. I have regular meetings with the content tutors with these students to kind of be across where that student's at, to support them in the richest way possible.
Yeah, that works both ways. It's interesting how often the content specialists don't have that language speciality that we do. They don't look at language quite often the same way that we do. They'll look at something and they'll say, oh, well, they've just got horrible grammar.
Yeah.
Whereas, it might be, it's not bad grammar, it's just everyday English. It doesn't have a certain level of formality that they're expecting. I had one instructor who was a HDR convener one time, and he gave us a call and he said, you got to come help me. I've got a student who's finishing his thesis in about a month's time, and the English is horrible. And I was like, okay, I don't know what we can do in a month, but let's have a look. And I went and I sat down with the convener and the student who was from Korea. And it was interesting because, there were he was obviously a very high level user of English. He had very strong written skills. And I'm reading through it and I'm seeing little mistakes, something that a proofreader could pick up. But I was just a bit confused. I'm like, I'm not sure what you're looking. He's like, well, this isn't how we reference law, and this isn't how we introduce cases. And it was just amazing to me that he saw that as a language issue, and I didn't even see the language problems that he was talking about. And it's that negotiation between the content academics who speak this language fluently, and so fluently that they don't realize that it's a special type of jargon, a type of academic slang.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're often having to navigate that space between the student and the conveners.
Yeah, I think you've all brought up some really important things there. And just thinking about the skill set that ELICOS teachers have or can have if you develop that skill, knowledge of genre and the ability, discourse analysis and the ability there. We don't have to be the content experts, and we are not the content experts, but as an applied linguist, you learn to analyze discourse and look for patterns, and that's what you can bring to this space. And you're absolutely right, John. There's often a misunderstanding of that by the non-expert, and the difference between English language proficiency and academic literacies. There's a bit of a misunderstanding sometimes as well. And you're also really right that about navigating the university processes and governance and rules is also something that we can help students with. I'd like to move to the third question, which is, what's your advice for ELICOS teachers wishing to make the transition? You've all done it successfully, but we've got how many people here? Lots of people. I
think it's about 100 now.
Lots of you who are all keen to make the transition. So I don't know, Donna, would you like to start? Some advice for ELICOS teachers who want to get into PEAL?
I think acknowledge your own strengths first. Don't see yourself, just as when I was promoting the English Language Centre, we're not just an ELICOS centre, you're not just ELICOS teachers. There's so much that an ELICOS teacher brings to any situation. I mean, we have a real practical understanding of diversity. We value our students' stories and culture, and we've been supporting them to transition from one culture to another and from one learning environment to another. So that's a skill that every ELICOS teacher I've ever worked with has had, and that's a really valuable skill as well. Of course, you have the solid knowledge of methodology and pedagogy. You're able to scaffold tasks, you're able to unpack tasks that often other educators within the university don't necessarily do for all levels of students. You can create teaching experiences and digitalise those inside the classroom and on Moodle or whatever your learning platform is. Every ELICOS teacher I've ever worked with has had an incredible ability to adapt, and they've been really flexible and willing to, you know, keep up with the latest. So they're all really important things that you can frame and bring to any kind of situation where you may be applying for a job or hoping to be heard or noticed. Reflecting what everybody has said, do your research, do your reading, upskill, you know, learn the new, you know, whatever is important in e-learning, learn as much of it as you can, and be ready to adapt to the new situation so that you frame yourself to fit the position, and don't forget how much wealth you bring, wealth of experience and wealth of knowledge you bring to any such position.
Okay, any of the other panelists like to add to that? Very nice summary, thank you.
I'd like to just a quick pointer is like, don't be intimidated by the context. I've met many language teachers who have thought, oh, I can't do that. These students are studying chemistry. I can't help them write. Don't be intimidated by the culture. If you've got discourse analysis skills, you can look at text, you can see the language around it, you can learn how texts are created, their schematic structure, and you can help people with that. Don't be intimidated. You've got the skills.
I think you're right, Sue. Don't be intimidated. Just to counter that slightly, you do have to be aware of a different context, though, wouldn't you say? You have to be aware of academics do think quite differently, and you need to tap into that in a way. You were talking about collaborating before, so you've got to be sensitive to the culture and the hierarchies that occur in the higher ed space.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that, Pamela, because it's a completely different, you need to be aware of that. I guess the point I was trying to make was don't be afraid of a discipline that you haven't personally studied.
Sure,
okay, sure. You can work in that sphere. Yeah,
absolutely. John, Marnie, do you want to add some advice?
Oh, look, I think a little piece of advice would be just to really stay on top of the literature, like we were saying before, and you know, you can even create little journal discussion groups for yourself. Like I know English Australia has published an article on the Journal Club, which is what we've done since 2014 at the English Language Centre here at Macquarie University. They're a really, really good way to stay, you know, relevant and stay fresh in your knowledge, and also to collaborate and to build networks with your group, or whoever your group is. And I think when you're dealing with a whole lot of different discipline areas in the PEAL space, it's great. It's a great little thing to be able to do.
John, would you like to add any further advice?
It may not make as much sense in the context that we're in now, but I would say don't pass up on opportunities. I mean, right now, we're all grabbing whatever opportunity we can. That's kind of where we're at. But eventually things will get back to a normal, and opportunities will come up, and grab those while you can, when you can. Never miss the opportunity to upskill. You know, it's a lot of times, you know, programs will get started, and you know, a lot of the university programs, they'll go back to who they know. And so a lot of times I see, the same person get approached again and again and again to do these workshops or to head up this program. And so if you pass it up once, it may not come back around for you to try it out the next time.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. So what I'm going to do very shortly is to open up to the audience to ask some questions. Sophie, I think you're going to field them to me in the chat.
Yes, I will.
Okay, while you're doing that, I'll just kind of summarize some of the comments that have been said mentioned so far. We've been talking about the transferable skills that ELICOS teachers have, and to acknowledge that and not to be intimidated, particularly with teaching in a different discipline to what you're used to. Definitely agree with people saying take the opportunities, build networks. We talked about some conscious upskilling, and we can have a little conversation about that if you'd like us to, and about framing yourself not as an ELICOS teacher but as somebody who has this expertise. We've been talking about the pedagogical and methodological expertise that ELICOS teachers definitely have, and that's not always the case in higher ed, I have to say. But also acknowledging that academics do think differently. We've talked a lot about research. What motivates academics is evidence-based research, literature, frameworks, and if you can say those buzzwords, you're going to get them to open their door to you. If you just go in with kind of ELICOS type activities, that's not going to resonate all that much with them. But definitely reading the literature, reading standards, and getting some experience yourself, maybe as a lecturer or a tutor, or even things like PAL Pass experience. And that will stand you in good stead. Sophie, do we have a question? Okay, where should we be looking for opportunities? Oh, it's disappeared. Where should we be looking for opportunities, and what kind of search terms would be helpful to put in an online job search? Anybody want to answer that? So somebody.
Catherine said learning advisor. Catherine's answered learning advisor, learning skills advisor.
I've tried, that was my question. I've tried that. And it's, yeah, it just doesn't show up much at all. I don't know if that means there's no opportunities, but I'm just wondering, besides LSA, are there other terms you would recommend?
I know that learning advisors, those are two. I know there's a position that's going at Griffith right now, and one at UQ as well.
There's quite a lot of positions coming up, actually. Just recently, there's been a lot of ads on Seek.
Academic
they tend to be
learning
fixed
advisor.
term, but yeah.
Yeah. The person also asked about institutions and websites to look at. I see that somebody put the AALL in the chat. The Association of Academic Language and Learning, that's definitely one to be connected to. Not to mention this SIG, which is absolutely fantastic. Anything else?
I would say in a university job center, they all provide subscription services that you can subscribe, and most of them, even in this climate, most of them are hiring a lot. It's just they're large corporations that. Oops, did I say corporation? They're large institutes that have a high turnover. So there's a lot of jobs that come up regularly at universities.
Okay, somebody's asked me about a word that I obviously didn't pronounce very clearly. I said PAL Pass. I said PAL Pass. Catherine, this was your suggestion. Can I bring you in, Kat, to explain PAL and Pass?
Oh, really? PASS is peer assisted study sessions, and that's something that I believe a lot of universities have set up. I'm not an expert in them, I'll just say that, but it's a sort of a program where peers, students who have previously done a unit of study are then employed and trained as facilitators on that unit of study for students coming through it. And it's quite a sort of structured approach, and they have very clear guidelines about what the peer facilitators are there to do and what they're not there to do. But it has been shown to be quite effective in certain discipline areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But perhaps if you're doing a master's, you could become a PASS mentor or whatever. Different universities use different terms. At Macquarie, I think they call it PAL Pass. I think that's fairly standard, but different universities use different terms. Somebody's asked about whether any of these roles tend to be remote. Like, could you be based in Melbourne but work in New South Wales or Queensland? It's possible, but unlikely. I guess it depends on the job.
I don't know of any right now.
I don't know that any are remote.
I think there was one at UTAS, but yeah.
So we've got another question here. From a funding perspective, are the adjunct activities at Griffith supported financially by the faculties or schools, or are they provided by some other mechanism? John, do you want to mention the funding?
So at Griffith, it's complicated. Some are funded by schools, some are funded by GELI and then were reimbursed some of it. Like a lot of it is budgeted for. So it's a service model as opposed to a for-profit model. But not all universities set it up that way. A lot of universities still run academic support out of their own schools and faculties. That was one of the things that Griffith, I think Pamela might be able to speak more to that, but one of the struggles we had earlier was pulling all that back from the schools and centralizing it so that we had a more coherent program to deliver.
Yeah, most universities have funding for a central unit of some description. Sometimes that's entirely centralized, sometimes decentralized. There's always some funding. The funding for the work that you do, John, came from a very different budget, but it's quite unique, I think.
Yeah,
Credit-bearing units obviously are funded by student fees, so that's quite different. So funding models vary. Sometimes faculties fund it. We did something, I can see Luke there who worked at Macquarie a year or so ago, and we did some work in the Macquarie Business School, and that was funded directly from SAF until they changed the rules about what you could spend SAF money on. So there are very different funding models across the country, depending on the institution.
Hey, Pamela.
Yes.
I just skipping ahead, and I know because we're a bit short on time. Kathy Senior has mentioned that she does academic support at TAFE.
Yeah.
And a lot of us do work in a different sector. Do you think maybe we could take a minute to hear about her experience?
Kathy, are you there? And
yes. Hi.
I'm not quite sure what to say about the TAFE section. And I know that we've been very university focused.
Yeah.
I guess that's our expertise. So would love to hear from you.
Yeah. So so my background is as an ESL teacher, but about just before lockdown, so I'm in Victoria, we started doing a pilot project, and it was based around retention. And because Victoria has the free TAFE system, and so what happened with TAFE when free TAFE came in was there are a lot of students that weren't coping, and a lot of teachers that weren't coping too, because they were inundated with enrolments. And so then there was a retention issue, and they wanted to retain the students, and so then they started this up, and so now. That was as a pilot last year, and now it's become an ongoing position. And it's basically, I've basically set it up how I think it should work. So it's students book in for 1 hour sessions, and that can be weekly, that can be, it depends because it gets booked out. So there's definitely a need for it.
And how is that funded?
It is actually through, so originally my manager supported it within the foundation studies area within TAFE, and now it's been moved over into student support services.
Kathy,
do
you have to have the Cert 4 in training and assessment that's obligatory to teach in that space?
But I taught English internationally, whatever, and within migrants and international students in Australia too. The
AMAP.
So they basically thought it did work. I mean, there was a lot of students that stayed the TAFE, especially. Yeah, and so that's
Absolutely.
and you were talking about like working with you. It is very collaborative. So I go back and communicate to every teacher of what that student's done, and so either the student self-refers or the teacher refers them. It initially was through retention, but that was a little bit negative, because then students not necessarily wanted to come to me because they thought, well, I'm failing or whatever. But now it's just students just keep coming. Yeah,
it can be quite unquantifiable. Marta, I've noticed that you've made a comment about that. Would you like to speak to your comment about the opportunities that you mentioned?
Look, this is more general opportunities, but with pathways, when you're in general in pathways, you engage with a lot of RTOs that are external to universities, and they are private providers. There's quite a few big private providers out there, international and domestic, and TAFEs. And they often have opportunities, and often they would come and ask, do you know anyone in that such and such area? So I know, as Kat was saying, that transition is possible. So there are opportunities. I think we just need to be open to actually look into RTOs or vet sector as well.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. Do we have any other burning questions from the audience?
I was just about to say, Pamela, sort of like related to the vet sector, I think any ELICOS teachers who also have numeracy skills are very well positioned to move into vet. So I've had some ex-colleagues who have come from, say, science backgrounds or maths backgrounds who would probably find a niche for themselves in that sector very well. If they can do literacy and numeracy, that's a good selling point.
Yeah, that's really growing. In fact, in the next couple of months, I know I'm going to be hiring somebody who can do not just the academic language side, but also the maths. Partly because of the closed borders, we've got more and more domestic students in our college right now, and we're finding that, don't mean to make great generalizations about whole cohorts of students, but while the international students are pretty good at maths, the domestics are less so on the whole. So we're finding that we need to provide more and more math support, and I think that's actually going to grow. So yeah, if you have a background in maths and you've got the ELICOS teaching ability, oof, the world is your oyster.
I mean, yeah, that's very true. I mean, we've got the numeracy centre down here at the uni, but I've got a student who's doing a Masters of Primary, and now you've got to do this test called the Landtype test. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. It's an extra exam that the teachers need to do before they pass their degree in primary school teaching, for example. And she cannot get a person, there's just no availability. So we've been trying to get someone who can work with her numeracy for her primary education. It's not easy. So yeah, come on down to the uni if you got some numeracy skills.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm looking at the time and I can see that we're running out of time. So what I'd like to do is just kind of bring this all together. I hope that you found that really useful. I think the 4 panelists have been fantastic, very varied backgrounds. You can see that the PEAL space is very varied. And some of the things that we've talked about is getting to know the governance and read the literature, understand some of the notions in the PEAL space. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to put up a kind of starter pack to get you guys reading some of the standards and the literature in this space. Sophie's busily putting things in the chat there. If you'd like to watch previous webinars, you can find them, those links, and you can register for some of the upcoming PEAL events, which I'll just mention briefly. Our next one is on the 21st of July. And that one is about what happens to English language proficiency during degrees, which is a passion of mine. We also have the conference, the English Australia conference in September, where we'll be talking about archetypal mechanisms in the PEAL space, things like credit bearing, embedded, adjunct, some of these terms that we've been bandying around today. And then in November, 17th of November, we're talking about evaluation and impact in the PEAL space. And I think this is really critical if we want to continue to get funding, and having mentioned that academics really value research and evidence, then we have to get really good at measuring, evaluating, and showing the impact that we make in the PEAL space. So those are the next 3 sessions that the SIG will be delivering. So you can register for all of those now. You can also sign up for the SIG. I hope you found that useful. Hope to see you again at the next one. And a huge thank you to the panelists and a virtual clap. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Okay, see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Hi, thanks.